Death. One of the most elusive themes in media, it leaves authors and those consuming the media alike to interpret its truth in a variety of ways. It is utilized as an agent of justice and an agent of chaos, a means of imprisonment and freedom, and is both embraced and struggled against. In this video, we will explore how death and the fear or resistance to it resonate across different forms of media, focusing primarily on Frankenstein, but also exploring how death in The Crucible, The Odyssey, and The Tempest shape both the plot and its characters, and how the theme of death in these literature works is still relevant today. In all four pieces of literature, death is used as a plot driver and shapes the characters' motives, but as a theme, it is used in a number of different ways. Not only do characters struggle against death and see it as a threat, it is used to advance personal interests, it is used to other and isolate individuals, it is used to manipulate and gain power, and it is used both to define and falsely frame characters. Many characters throughout Frankenstein, The Crucible, The Tempest, and The Odyssey deal with themes of life and death, and often walk the line between the two. Victor Frankenstein, for example, actively creates life from death, and Abigail from The Crucible creates death in an attempt to improve her own life. Many characters attempt to avoid death, especially those most afraid of it. Victor tries multiple times to escape death, at first through his creation and then from his creation. Abigail and many of the people of Salem, notably those accused of witchcraft, try to avoid death by terribly contorting narratives and the truth. Odysseus avoids death multiple times throughout the trials and tribulations of his journey, as do those shipwrecked on Prospero's island in The Tempest. But often, the avoidance in turn creates more death than before, and death at times is almost a character itself. Death plays a big role in many characters' motivations, with characters attempting to beat death entirely or play God, toying with the lives of others. Victor Frankenstein's main motivator is death. Deeply affected by the death of his mother, Victor attempts to find a solution to death through the creation of synthetic life. But the creation of this monster has consequences when he rejects it entirely, accidentally isolating and manipulating the monster into a twisted seeker of revenge who resents his creator. Other characters, on the other hand, such as Abigail from The Crucible, are willing to let others die or even kill to further their motives and gain the trust of those in power, as shown by her ability to trick others into accusing innocent people of witchcraft or even lie to protect her, eventually ensuing mass hysteria. All of this is done so people don't know of her intense obsession and affair with John Proctor. The fear of death and manipulation utilizing that fear to advance individual motives is most notably resounding in The Crucible, with Davenport and other authoritative figures using the threat of death to get the answer they want to hear out of the defendant, rather than the honest truth. It is also seen in The Tempest, when Prospero lies to Alonso about the death of his son, Ferdinand, so he is able to give Ferdinand his blessing in secret, allowing him and Miranda to marry, restoring his dukedom. Although nobody dies in The Tempest, death is still used as a means to manipulate and advance Prospero's goals. Victor and Caliban are similar as well, in that the death of their mothers shaped their characters' motivations significantly, but in different ways. Caliban, who is revenge-oriented, in reality is more akin to Frankenstein's monster, who is deeply motivated by death due to the revenge he seeks, killing multiple characters to prove his point to Victor. In this sense, death is also used as a means of twisted justice, meaning that those who inflict death on others see it as a just act, one that is seen as an equal exchange or fair. Death, in this context, is used as a symbolic weapon or psychological warfare. The townspeople of Salem, Elizabeth and John from The Crucible, and Justine from Frankenstein, are all framed for a crime they didn't commit and are hanged. Both Abigail and the monster plant items which make Elizabeth and Justine, respectively, look guilty. The monster's killing of everyone Victor loves is seen as justified in the monster's eyes, as the world, starting with his own creator, has only shown him cruelty. By killing those closest to Victor, whom he sees as the embodiment of evil, he is killing his quote-unquote badness. In Frankenstein, death is revenge and score settling. In The Crucible, the judges and reverends, particularly Davenport, see their multiple hangings as justified until the very end. Abigail justifies the hangings as her deserving John, but as we know, John is one of the only ones who sees the deaths as an injustice, knowing he is the root of the issue, and in the face of mass hysteria, he claims that God is dead. It can be said that death, or rather, the fear of it, also leads to othering, which in turn causes more tragedy and death throughout multiple storylines. For example, we can see how this othering manifests in Frankenstein's monster, essentially turning him into what he is perceived as. He is not murderous or grotesque at heart. It is simply because he is perceived as such by his own creator and normal civilians like the DeLacys that he becomes a bringer of death. In The Crucible, those accused of witchcraft are sentenced to death if they deny witchcraft, leading to more executions as the entire basis of the accusations were false to begin with. What starts as a lie by Abigail and the girls due to an extreme fear of death, both for themselves and for Betty who is ill, turns into a rolling stone of death, eventually stopping at the very last person Abigail ever wanted to kill, John Proctor. Death also acts as an agent to other Caliban in The Tempest. Although his mother is killed before the plot begins, her death is the catalyst to Prospero's ownership of the island and imprisonment and exploitation of Caliban. In the Odyssey, Odysseus is considered dead due to being gone for so long and is essentially excommunicated from his community, which acts as the catalyst for his son to no longer tolerate his father's social ostracization and kicks off the entire plot. This extreme isolation and othering by the community is another example of death being used to cruelly outcast characters. Death and love are also inexplicably linked as themes throughout all four of the works as well. Although Odysseus is perceived as dead, he persists through his journey to return to his life and his love and object of desire, Penelope. Similarly, Ferdinand's death in The Tempest is also a farce, but his fake death pushes him closer to his love interest Miranda, and in turn advances both her and Prospero's goals. On a darker note, some are willing to kill or allow death to flourish to pursue their love interest, quite literally doing whatever it takes to find love. Abigail is quite literally threatening anyone who refuses her and John relationship, including his own wife, with death. In turn, she ends up killing her love interest. Similarly, Frankenstein's monster only desires a loving partner, someone who will not ostracize him, and when his potential love interest is destroyed, he kills victors, believing that if he is not entitled to love, his creator shouldn't be either. All four of these works tell us one thing in common: death can impact and shape us in a multitude of different ways. Oftentimes, we as humans try to avoid death, and in extreme circumstances, we allow for the deaths of others to save ourselves. Death is cruel, but can also be used to advance plot lines and goals. And it is an enigma, an unknown from which we cannot escape, making it always relevant. As long as we are trying to avoid death, death will always be a resounding and relevant theme within literature, other works, and society at large. It's why we keep seeing modern adaptations of these novels. The idea of death and our lack of control over it in real life still unsettles the vast majority and transcends time. Modern adaptations highlight this fear, and as technology advances and new mediums for telling these macabre stories emerge, one thing will always remain clear: death looms over us. It's a central theme of life itself.